The quiet of the house was shattered by the soft buzz of a notification. The sound echoed in the stillness of the night, and Michael stirred from the half-sleep he had drifted into. He lay on his back, staring at the dark ceiling, his mind racing with the unease that had been gnawing at him for weeks. Beside him, Jennifer was fast asleep, her steady breathing filling the space between them, a space that felt like a canyon. Another buzz. It came from Jennifer's phone on the nightstand. Normally, he wouldn't have thought twice about it. Everyone gets messages, even late at night. But something inside him, a voice he had been trying to ignore, pushed him to check. The distance between them had grown, slowly at first, then rapidly, like a rope fraying until it snapped. Jennifer had become distant, cold, as if something in her had turned off. Michael hesitated, glancing over at her. She was curled up on her side, her back to him, breathing softly in her sleep. His heart thudded in his chest, a strange mix of guilt and suspicion flooding his mind. But the unease was too powerful to resist. His hand moved on its own, reaching for her phone. The screen illuminated with a soft glow, and there it was, a message. It was from a number he didn't recognize. "Can't wait to feel you inside me tonight. My loser husband will never suspect a thing." His breath caught in his throat. The words slammed into him, each one like a punch to the gut. His eyes blinked, once, twice, as if hoping the words would disappear, but they stayed. His pulse quickened, and suddenly, his hands were moving without thought. He scrolled up through the conversation, and what he found made his stomach turn. Messages, dozens of them, maybe more, all flirtatious, all explicit, filled with graphic details of their encounters, mocking him in ways that left him breathless. He could see it all in his mind, a reel of betrayal playing out in vivid detail. The dates, the times they had met, the places they had gone, some of which were places he had taken her to. His vision blurred, his breath quickening as he scrolled through, reading every painful word. "Last night was amazing. You know how to make me feel things he never could. Can't wait to sneak away with you again." He has no idea. What an idiot. Michael's hand trembled as he put the phone down, his mind spinning. The room felt smaller now, the air heavy. He stared at Jennifer, still asleep, blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing beside her. The betrayal cut so deep he felt like he might choke on it. He had suspected something was wrong for a while, but this was worse than anything he could have imagined. His hand clenched the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. He could feel the fury rising inside him, burning hot, but beneath there was a cold numbness, a disbelief that this was happening. He had loved her, had given her everything he could. How long had this been going on? How many lies had she told him while she was sleeping with someone else? He couldn't stay silent anymore. His voice cracked as he spoke, each word like glass in his throat. "What the fuck is this, Jennifer?" The words seemed to pull her from her sleep. She stirred, groaning softly, then blinked her eyes open. For a second, she seemed disoriented, her eyes squinting in the dim light. Then her gaze fell on the phone in his hand, and something shifted in her expression. It wasn't fear or remorse, it was annoyance. "What?" she muttered, sitting up slightly, rubbing her eyes. "What's your problem?" Michael held up the phone, the screen still showing one of the damning messages. "This? What the fuck is this, Jennifer?" Jennifer's face remained unfazed. She glanced at the phone, her eyes scanning the message with a lazy disinterest before a slow smirk spread across her lips. "You went through my phone?" she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's low. Even for you." Michael felt his jaw tighten. "Don't turn this around on me, Jennifer. You're cheating on me. How long has this been going on?" Jennifer rolled her eyes, as if this whole confrontation was an inconvenience to her. "Oh, spare me the dramatic outburst. You've known something was off for a while, haven't you? And now you've got your proof. Congratulations." The nonchalance in her voice made his blood boil. "Who is he?" Michael demanded, his voice shaking with anger. "Who's the guy you've been screwing behind my back?" Jennifer leaned back against the headboard, crossing her arms over her chest. "His name's Nick. He's someone who actually knows how to satisfy me and use his tongue in bed, unlike you. You better watch and learn." The words hit him like a punch. He felt a sharp pain in his chest, his stomach twisting with a mix of rage and heartbreak. "You bitch," he started, but she cut him off with a laugh. "You're pathetic, Michael. Always have been. You think just because you married me that you own me? That I'm supposed to put up with your boring life and your pathetic attempts at being a husband?" Michael stood there, stunned, his hands trembling. He had expected anger, maybe guilt, but this was cruelty. "I gave you everything," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. Jennifer shrugged, and it wasn't enough. The sound of the door creaking open cut through the tense silence that hung in the room. Michael's eyes snapped toward the doorway, where a man stood with a suitcase in hand, looking like he owned the place. He had sharp features, tall and fit, with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. The smirk on his face made Michael's stomach twist. This was him, the man who had stolen his wife's affection. "Ready for our adventure, babe?" the man said casually, his voice full of cockiness. He stepped further into the room, dragging his suitcase behind him with a deliberate slowness, like he had all the time in the world. 30 rounds a day, just like I promised." Michael's fists clenched by his sides, his nails digging into his palms as he struggled to process the absurdity of the situation. This stranger was standing in his bedroom, acting like Michael was the outsider. Jennifer, still in bed, slid the covers aside and stood up, wearing nothing but the same smug grin as the man she had been sleeping with behind Michael's back. She crossed the room with a swagger Michael had never seen in her before, moving toward the man like she was walking toward her savior. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing her lips to his in a slow, deliberate kiss. Michael watched, feeling a mix of rage and disbelief. He wanted to scream, to throw something, but all he could do was stand there, frozen. Jennifer finally pulled away from the man, turning her attention back to Michael, her lips curling into a smirk. "We're moving in together," she said, the words dripping with triumph. "The house is in my name now, so pack your shit and get out." The words echoed in Michael's mind. The house is in my name. His throat tightened. He had worked for this house, saved up for years to buy it, to build a life with her, and now she was ripping it all away in an instant. "And I'll be taking half of everything in the divorce," she added, her voice cold and final, like a judge delivering a sentence. Michael stood there, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what was happening. The life he had built with her, the plans, the memories, everything was being torn apart before his eyes. She wasn't just leaving him. She was ripping his entire world apart, and doing it with a smile. The man, Nick he must be, leaned back against the doorframe, casually crossing his arms, watching the scene unfold like it was a performance for his amusement. "You've got, what, an hour? Maybe 2 to pack up and go," Nick said, his tone dripping with fake sympathy. "Don't worry, I'll help her get settled in. I know where everything belongs." Michael's blood boiled, but beneath the fury was a strange calmness. He realized in that moment that this wasn't a fight he could win by exploding in anger. No amount of yelling, no threats or punches would change what had happened. Jennifer had already made her choice, and no matter what he said now, she had crossed a line she would never come back from. "You think you've won, don't you?" Michael's voice was low, almost too quiet to hear over the pounding of his heart. Jennifer and Nick exchanged a look, then burst into laughter. It was cruel and mocking, the kind of laugh that made Michael's skin crawl. They were enjoying this, enjoying his pain. "Won," Jennifer repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Michael, we've already won. You're the one who's lost here. You've always been a loser. You just didn't see it." Nick grinned. "Yeah, man, you should be thanking me. I'm doing you a favor, taking care of what you clearly couldn't." Jennifer sauntered over to the suitcase Nick had brought in, unzipping it and pulling out a few items of clothing, his clothing, Michael realized. She tossed them onto the bed, as if she was already making herself at home. "Nick's got everything I need, more than you ever could." Michael's hands were trembling, his nails biting deeper into his palms. Every instinct in him screamed to lash out, to fight, but something held him back. Something cold and calculating. A part of him realized this wasn't the time to strike. He was outnumbered here, and Jennifer and Nick had the upper hand. But that didn't mean he couldn't win. Not in the way they thought. "You can laugh now," Michael said, his voice still low, steady. But this isn't over. Nick scoffed. Sure it's not, buddy. Sure it's not. Michael ignored him, his eyes locked on Jennifer. You think you've got it all figured out. You think you're walking away from this with everything. But you don't know what's coming. Jennifer rolled her eyes. Oh, spare me the dramatic threats, Michael. Just leave already. You're embarrassing yourself. Michael felt a strange calm wash over him, like the eye of a storm. He looked at her, at the woman he had once loved, the woman who had betrayed him so completely, and felt something shift inside him. The hurt was still there, the anger simmering beneath the surface, but it was no longer blinding him. He could see clearly now. Without another word, Michael turned and walked out of the bedroom, leaving Jennifer and Nick behind, their laughter still echoing in his ears. He didn't stop, didn't look back, not even as he reached the hallway and the door to what had once been his home. His heart was pounding in his chest, his mind racing with a million thoughts. But one thought rose above the rest. They think they've won. Michael stepped outside into the cool night air, closing the door quietly behind him. He stood there for a moment, breathing in deeply, letting the night air cool his heated skin. His fists unclenched, the tension in his body slowly releasing. They had their moment of triumph now, but they didn't understand what he was capable of. Not yet. As he walked down the driveway, Michael pulled out his phone. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then started typing a message. It's time. The reply came almost instantly. Understood. Everything's ready. Michael slipped the phone back into his pocket, a cold smile forming on his lips. Jennifer and Nick had no idea what was about to hit them. They thought they were tearing his life apart, but in reality, they were handing him the keys to their own destruction. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest in Michael's life. Outwardly, he played the part of the defeated, broken husband, silently enduring the public humiliation of a messy divorce. Jennifer, now fully entangled in her affair with Nick, barely noticed him anymore. It was as if Michael had ceased to exist, reduced to a background figure in the world they had created for themselves. They flaunted their relationship openly, with no shame or remorse. Every time Michael saw them together, whether in person or through the endless social media posts, they were all smiles, playing house in his home. Jennifer and Nick posed for photos in the backyard he had landscaped with his own hands, using the kitchen where he had cooked countless meals for her. It was like living in a nightmare he couldn't wake from. But behind his calm, silent demeanor, Michael was seething. With each passing day, his resolve grew. He wasn't just going to get even, he was going to destroy them. Michael was careful, methodical. He didn't lash out in anger, didn't let his emotions control him. He played along, going through the motions of the divorce with a passive face. He even managed to muster a few polite words during the legal proceedings. Jennifer assumed she had won, that he was beaten and too humiliated to fight back. She couldn't have been more wrong. One day, as they sat in the lawyer's office, discussing the division of assets, Jennifer barely acknowledged him. She was distracted, texting on her phone, likely talking to Nick. Their lawyer droned on about the terms, and Michael simply nodded, as though he were too broken to care. Jennifer looked up for a moment, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. I'm glad you're being reasonable about all this, Michael. This is what's best for both of us. Michael forced a smile, biting back the rage. I want you to be happy, Jennifer. If this is what you need, I'll give it to you. She smiled sweetly, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing just beneath the surface. Behind the scenes, Michael was far from passive. He had access to everything more than they realized. Despite her arrogance, Jennifer had never changed any of her passwords. It was almost too easy for Michael to track her emails, her bank accounts, and even her social media. She and Nick were careless, openly flaunting their relationship without any concern that someone might be watching. Michael bided his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He spent his nights poring over every detail of Nick's life. He wasn't just going after Jennifer. Nick was part of this, and Michael wanted to hit him where it hurt the most. Through a series of well-placed searches and discreet phone calls, Michael discovered that Nick wasn't the smooth, successful man he pretended to be. In fact, Nick had a string of failed business ventures behind him, all hidden under the facade of a successful entrepreneur. It didn't take long for Michael to find the cracks in Nick's financial empire. Shady deals, unpaid debts, and questionable partnerships, all of it carefully hidden, but not enough to escape Michael's scrutiny. He knew exactly how to exploit Nick's weaknesses, but he wasn't going to rush it. Timing was everything. Every time Michael saw a new post from Jennifer and Nick, boasting about their new life together, he felt his patience harden. They would tag him in the photos as if to rub it in his face. Jennifer posted a picture of them by the pool, captioned "Starting fresh with someone who truly knows how to love me." Nick added a comment underneath, "Out with the old, in with the real man." Michael's lips tightened as he read the words, but he didn't react. Not yet. One afternoon, Michael went to his house, to collect the last of his things. Jennifer wasn't there, but Nick was lounging on the couch, flipping through a magazine as if he owned the place. When Michael walked in, Nick barely glanced up. "Hey man," Nick said with a smirk. "You finally here to get the rest of your stuff?" Jennifer said you'd be stopping by. Michael looked around the living room, every corner of it filled with memories of a life he had built, now contaminated by this stranger. He nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "Just here to grab a few things," Michael said quietly, his voice devoid of emotion. Nick chuckled. "Yeah, well, don't take too long. We're remodeling soon. This place is going to look a lot different." Michael didn't respond. He gathered his belongings methodically, packing up the last remnants of his old life. As he moved through the house, he saw evidence of their new life everywhere. Nick's shoes by the door, his jacket thrown carelessly on the chair, his presence a constant reminder of the betrayal. Nick followed him to the doorway when he was finished, leaning against the frame with a smug grin. "Look, man, no hard feelings, right? It's just how things worked out. Sometimes you gotta move on, you know?" Michael glanced at him, his eyes cold. "Yeah, I know." Nick's grin faltered for a moment, sensing something in Michael's tone, but he quickly brushed it off. "Good. Take care, buddy." Michael left without another word, but as he drove away, his mind was already calculating the next steps. He wasn't just moving on, he was preparing for the final blow. Weeks passed, and Michael continued to play the part of the quiet ex-husband. He showed up at meetings with the divorce lawyer, signed the papers, and kept a low profile. Jennifer and Nick continued to flaunt their relationship, oblivious to the fact that Michael was watching their every move. But behind the scenes, Michael was pulling strings. He had contacted a few of Nick's former business partners, under the guise of interest in an old investment. It didn't take much to dig up dirt. Stories of fraud, unpaid debts, and broken promises surfaced quickly. Nick had left a trail of enemies behind him, and all it took was a few nudges from Michael to bring those enemies to light. Michael also began compiling evidence, screenshots of the messages he had found on Jennifer's phone, copies of their financial records, and anything else that could be used to destroy the life they had built together. He wasn't planning to ruin them financially. He was going to burn their entire world to the ground. And then, when the time was right, he would strike. Michael knew it was only a matter of time before Jennifer and Nick realized what was happening. But by then, it would be too late. The storm was coming, and they would never see it until it was already upon them. The evening sky was painted with hues of orange and red as Jennifer and Nick pulled into the driveway of what they still believed was their home. They had just returned from a lavish vacation, one they had flaunted all over social media: luxurious dinners, beachside villas, and sunset cruises. Life, for them, seemed perfect. Jennifer stepped out of the car with a satisfied sigh, stretching her arms like she had not a care in the world. Nick followed, looking equally smug as they approached the front door. But as soon as they crossed the threshold, an eerie silence greeted them. The house, normally filled with the sound of music or the hum of appliances, was dead silent. Jennifer frowned, looking around. "Why is it so quiet?" she muttered, a slight edge to her voice. Nick didn't seem to notice the tension in her tone. He was more concerned with the sudden emptiness of the space around him. His eyes scanned the living room, where only days ago, his new designer furniture and luxury gadgets had been on full display. "Where's my stuff?" Nick's confusion turned into irritation as he noticed the living room was stripped bare. The fancy espresso machine he'd bragged about online, the custom leather couch he'd insisted they order gone. His expensive watch collection, the framed sports memorabilia. Everything had vanished. Jennifer glanced at him, her own confusion turning into something darker. "What the hell is going on?" she asked, her voice wavering slightly. Panic was creeping into her tone, though she tried to suppress it. They moved through the house, their steps echoing in the silence. The dining room was empty too, the custom marble table they had ordered gone without a trace. As they entered the kitchen, Nick's face flushed with anger. The fridge was left wide open, the shelves stripped bare of the gourmet food they had stocked before their trip. Even the wine cooler, once filled with expensive bottles, was empty. "Someone's been in here," Nick growled, his fists clenching. "This isn't right." Jennifer was no longer trying to hide her panic. "Nick, where's your car? It's not in the driveway anymore." Nick's head snapped up, and he rushed to the front window, pulling aside the curtain. His prized sports car, the one he had flaunted to Michael during their taunts, was gone. The driveway was empty. "This is bullshit," Nick snarled, his voice growing louder. He spun on his heel and stormed back into the living room. Who the fuck would dare? Before he could finish, a shadow moved from the corner of the room. Michael stepped out of the shadows, calm and composed, dressed in a plain, dark suit. He held a folder of documents in his hand, his expression unreadable. "Surprised?" Michael's voice was low and cold, slicing through the air like a blade. Both Jennifer and Nick froze in place, stunned by his sudden appearance. For a moment, no one said a word. The tension in the room was thick, palpable. Nick's anger was momentarily replaced with confusion, while Jennifer's face drained of color as a growing realization took hold. "What the fuck are you doing here?" Jennifer spat, but her voice betrayed the fear in her eyes. She wasn't in control anymore, and she knew it. Michael took a step closer, flipping open the folder in his hands. "Oh, I'm just here to let you know that everything you thought you had is gone." Nick blinked, clearly struggling to process Michael's words. "What the hell are you talking about?" he demanded, his bravado faltering for the first time. Michael's lips curled into a smirk, one that sent a chill down Jennifer's spine. "Your lover here," Michael continued, his eyes shifting to Nick, "is bankrupt. I made sure of it." Nick's face twisted in disbelief. "That's impossible. I've got investments." "Not anymore," Michael interrupted, taking another step forward. "While you were busy vacationing, I was busy doing my homework. I exposed your shady business deals, leaked your financial records to the right people, and now every asset you own has been frozen. I made sure of that too." Nick's face went pale, his hands balling into fists. You set me up," he stammered, taking a step toward Michael. He was furious, but Michael didn't flinch. "You did that all on your own," Michael said calmly, his tone almost casual. "I just helped speed up the inevitable." Nick's composure finally cracked, and he lunged at Michael, but Michael stood his ground, completely unfazed. Before Nick could reach him, Michael raised his hand, a small smirk playing on his lips. "You can't touch me," he said coolly. "I didn't break a single law. You, on the other hand, you've been embezzling money from your own company for years. I made sure the authorities know all about it." Nick stopped in his tracks, his breath catching in his throat. His mind raced, piecing together the extent of the damage Michael had caused. He had been so sure of his invincibility, so sure that no one could touch him. But now, standing in front of the man he had mocked and humiliated, Nick realized that Michael had outplayed him at every turn. "You son of a..." Nick started, but his voice faltered, and he took a step back, defeated. Jennifer, who had been silent until now, stepped forward, her face twisted in desperation. "Michael, you can't do this," she cried, her voice shrill. You'll what?" Michael cut her off, his eyes narrowing. "Beg? Sue me? Good luck with that." He reached into the folder and pulled out another set of papers, holding them up for her to see. "You should have read the fine print in your divorce settlement, Jennifer. The house isn't yours anymore either. I had it legally switched back into my name." Jennifer's jaw dropped. That's impossible. The house was part of the settlement. I own this house." "Not anymore," Michael said, his voice sharp. "You're both trespassing. I have legal documents proving that you no longer have any rights to this property." He tossed the papers onto the floor at her feet. "I suggest you leave before I call the police." The weight of Michael's words hung in the air like a hammer about to fall. Jennifer looked down at the papers, her hands shaking as she reached for them. She flipped through the pages, her face going white as she realized that everything he said was true. You can't do this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Tears welled in her eyes, but Michael showed no sign of pity. "You made your choices, Jennifer," Michael said coldly. "Now, you have to live with them." Nick, still reeling from the news of his financial ruin, glared at Michael, his fists clenched in frustration. "You think this makes you the bigger man, huh?" he sneered. "You think you've won?" Michael's expression didn't change. He simply shrugged. "I don't need to win. I just needed you both to lose." Jennifer's face crumpled as she realized the full extent of what had happened. She looked at Nick, hoping for some kind of reassurance, but he was too wrapped up in his own misery to offer any comfort. Their perfect world had crumbled in a matter of minutes, and there was nothing left for either of them to hold on to. Michael turned to leave, his footsteps echoing through the now bare house. Before he reached the door, he paused and looked back at them one last time. "Oh, and one more thing," he added, his voice cold and detached. "I suggest you pack your bags quickly. The police will be here soon to deal with the trespassers." Without another word, he walked out, leaving Jennifer and Nick standing in the ruins of the life they thought they had built. Their empire of lies had fallen, and Michael had made sure they would never recover. The door clicked shut behind him, and for the first time in weeks, Michael felt a sense of peace. The flashing lights of the police car cast long shadows across the street as officers secured the scene. Neighbors gathered at the edges of their yards, curious whispers filling the air. Michael stood on the front porch, arms crossed, watching the events unfold with a detached calm. Jennifer's lover, Nick, was let out of the house in handcuffs, his once arrogant demeanor shattered. He was no longer the man who had strutted into Michael's life with a smirk and empty promises. Now, he was just another con artist whose empire had collapsed under the weight of his own greed. As Nick was placed into the back of the police car, he shot one last venomous look at Michael. "You'll pay for this," he spat, his voice hoarse with desperation. "I swear, you'll regret this." Michael didn't flinch. He simply held Nick's gaze, his expression unreadable. "I already paid, Nick. Now it's your turn." The door slammed shut, cutting off any retort. The police cruiser's lights flickered before it pulled away, taking Nick to face the consequences of his actions. Michael watched until the car disappeared down the road, a deep sense of finality settling over him. He turned to leave, but as he reached for the door, he heard a choked sob. He paused, glancing back to find Jennifer kneeling on the lawn, her face streaked with tears. She looked small, broken, and utterly defeated. "Michael," she whimpered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please." Michael hesitated, his hand still resting on the door handle. For a moment, the years they had shared together flashed through his mind, the laughter, the dreams, the love they had once built. But those memories were tainted now, destroyed by her betrayal. He took a deep breath, pushing the sentiment aside. Jennifer crawled toward him, her hands trembling as she reached for the hem of his pants. "I made a mistake," she sobbed, her voice cracking. "I was wrong, Michael. I didn't know what I was doing. Please, please give me another chance. I'll do anything. Just don't leave me like this." Her desperation was palpable, but Michael felt nothing. The woman begging before him wasn't the same person he had once loved. She was a stranger, someone who had chosen to destroy their life together for selfish desires. The anger he had once felt had long since faded, replaced by a cold indifference. He looked down at her, his expression hard. "You didn't just make a mistake, Jennifer," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You made choices. Choices that ruined everything." Jennifer sobbed harder, clutching at his leg, as if holding on to him would somehow undo the damage she had caused. "Please, I'll make it right," she pleaded. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I love you, Michael. I swear I still love you." Michael's jaw clenched, but his eyes remained cold. "You love me," he repeated, the words bitter in his mouth. "You threw away our marriage for a man who's now going to prison. You mocked me, humiliated me, and now you want me to believe you love me. Jennifer's face contorted with guilt, her tears flowing freely. "I wasn't thinking straight," she stammered. "I was stupid and selfish, but I see that now. I know I hurt you. Please, don't turn your back on me." For a moment, Michael stood silent, watching her crumble before him. Once, he had imagined this moment, her groveling, her begging for forgiveness, and he had thought it might bring him satisfaction. But as he stood there now, all he felt was an overwhelming sense of emptiness. There was no pleasure in seeing her like this, no victory in her suffering. He sighed, his voice calm but firm. "No, Jennifer, I'm done." Her eyes widened in shock, as if she couldn't comprehend his rejection. "What? What do you mean, no?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I mean, I'm done," Michael repeated. "There's no going back. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it." Jennifer's hands fell from his leg as the weight of his words hit her. "Michael, please." But Michael turned away, walking back into the house without another glance. The door clicked shut behind him, cutting off her cries. In the months that followed, Michael's life began to rebuild. He moved out of the house that had once been a symbol of his failed marriage and into a new home across town. It was a fresh start, free from the ghosts of his past. He focused on himself for the first time in years, throwing himself into work and hobbies he had once neglected. He started a small business, something he had dreamed about for years but had always put on hold for the sake of his marriage. Now, with no one holding him back, he poured his energy into it, watching it grow steadily. His solitude became his sanctuary, a place where he could finally find peace. Jennifer, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. Her life spiraled out of control after that day. With Nick in prison, she was left with nothing. The man she had betrayed her marriage for had scammed her, using her to further his own financial schemes. The money they had flaunted was gone, and she was left drowning in debt. Friends who had once been part of her social circle turned their backs on her, gossiping about her downfall behind closed doors. Her once pristine reputation was in tatters. The affair, the scandal, the public humiliation, it had all caught up with her. She lost her job, her social standing, and the home she had so arrogantly taken from Michael. Michael heard whispers of her struggles from time to time, but he didn't seek out the details. He didn't need to. Karma, it seemed, had done its work, and Jennifer was living out the consequences of her actions. One day, as Michael sat in his office, finalizing plans for a business expansion, a familiar name appeared in his inbox. It was a message from Jennifer. The subject line read, "I'm sorry." Michael stared at the screen for a long moment before clicking it open. The email was short, a few paragraphs of regret and apology, laced with pleas for forgiveness. She spoke of her pain, of her regrets, of how she wished things had been different. But for Michael, the chapter was already closed. He didn't need an apology. He didn't need closure. He had moved on. He hit delete and returned to his work. The weight of the past finally lifted from his shoulders. As time went on, Michael thrived. His business grew, his circle of friends expanded, and for the first time in a long while, he found contentment in his own company. He didn't need revenge, didn't need to see Jennifer suffer to feel whole again. He was free. Jennifer, meanwhile, continued to struggle, lost in the wreckage of the life she had destroyed. She had gambled everything and lost, and now there was no one left to pick up the pieces. In the end, Michael didn't watch from a distance with glee. He didn't revel in her downfall. Instead, he simply moved forward, leaving her and the pain of their past behind him. Michael sat on the porch of his new home, a modest yet cozy space nestled away from the noise of the city. The soft glow of the sunset bathed everything in golden light, casting long shadows on the ground. He took a deep breath, savoring the quiet. It had been a long road, one filled with heartbreak, anger, and betrayal. But now, in this moment, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: peace. The wind rustled through the trees as he sipped his coffee, his gaze drifting over the neatly kept garden. He thought back to the chaos that had once consumed his life. The lies, the deceit, the nights spent wondering where everything had gone wrong. But all that felt distant now, like a storm that had finally passed. As he leaned back in his chair, his phone buzzed on the table beside him. For a brief second, Michael hesitated, half expecting it to be another message from Jennifer. She had tried reaching out to him several times over the past few months, pleading for forgiveness, begging for one last chance. He had read the first few messages, feeling nothing but a hollow satisfaction that she was facing the consequences of her actions. But he had since stopped responding, deleting her messages without a second thought. Today was different, though. The notification was from an old friend, congratulating him on the success of his business's latest venture. Michael smiled slightly, typing a quick response. His company had flourished over the last few months, expanding faster than he had ever anticipated. It had given him a sense of purpose and a fresh start, one he embraced fully. His thoughts wandered back to Jennifer. He hadn't seen her in person since the day he left her sobbing in the yard. He had heard rumors, of course, friends of friends mentioning her name in passing, whispers about how her life had unraveled. She lived in a dingy apartment on the other side of town now, far from the comfort and luxury she once flaunted. Nick, her lover, was still serving time, his schemes laid bare for the world to see. Without him, Jennifer had lost everything: the money, the friends, the lifestyle she had traded her marriage for. Michael had once imagined how satisfying it would be to see her suffer, to watch her crumble under the weight of her own decisions. But now, the reality of it didn't give him the joy he had expected. In fact, it didn't affect him at all. It was as if a weight had been lifted from him the day he decided to walk away for good. The sound of footsteps on gravel caught his attention. Looking up, he saw his neighbor, an older man named Richard, waving as he walked by with his dog. "Evening, Michael," Richard called out. "Evening," Michael replied with a nod. "How's the walk?" "Peaceful as ever," Richard said with a chuckle. "Good weather for it." Michael smiled as the man continued on his way. It was moments like this, simple, quiet interactions, that reminded him of the life he had rebuilt for himself. It wasn't flashy or filled with drama, but it was real. It was solid. He thought back to the person he had been before all of this. The version of him that had clung to a toxic relationship, desperate to fix something that had long been broken. He barely recognized that man anymore. Now he was someone who valued his own worth, someone who had learned the hard way that peace couldn't be found in revenge or validation from others. The door behind him creaked open, and his friend and business partner, Lance, stepped out onto the porch, holding 2 beers. "Thought you could use one of these," Lance said, handing him a bottle. Michael accepted the drink with a grin. "You know me too well?" Lance sat down in the chair beside him, stretching out his legs. "Hard to believe where we are now, huh? Considering how things were not that long ago." "Yeah," Michael agreed, taking a sip. "It feels like a lifetime ago." Lance glanced over at him, a curious expression on his face. "So, you ever hear from her?" Michael knew exactly who he meant. "Not anymore," he said, shaking his head. "She tried for a while, but I stopped responding." "Good," Lance said firmly. "She's not worth it." "I know." Michael stared out at the horizon again, the sun dipping lower. "I don't think about her much anymore. I thought I'd hold on to the anger forever, but it's gone. All of it." Lance raised his bottle. "To moving on, then." Michael clinked his bottle against Lance's. "To moving on." As the evening wore on, they chatted about business, plans for the future, and the small things in life that made everything worthwhile. There were no lingering feelings of bitterness, no unresolved anger gnawing at Michael's soul. He had come out the other side, not just surviving, but thriving. When Lance eventually left, Michael stayed on the porch, watching the last of the sunset fade into night. He thought back to everything he had lost and everything he had gained. Jennifer was a distant memory now, just a chapter in his life that had closed. He stood up, stretched, and walked inside his new home, feeling a deep sense of closure. There would be no more looking back, no more wondering what could have been. He was at peace with the choices he had made and the path he had taken. And for the first time in a long time, Michael knew that he had truly won, not through revenge or hatred, but by reclaiming his life and finding peace in his own way.